Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to this very special A Break in the Clouds report with Penny Kelly. You can find her work on YouTube here at Penny Kelly and also on the web at consciousnessonfire.com. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to her newsletter. Penny, welcome back to the show. How are you?
It's good to be here. I'm doing fine. Hope
Excited
everybody
to have you on.
too. Yeah.
Excited to have you on. We missed each other a couple of weeks ago. I had to cancel. I think it was for my dental surgery. I think it was. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I'm happy you're back on. Thank you so much. And I had a lot of emails of people saying, "Make sure you reschedule. We wanted to hear what you have to say." So that's yes. We found the first available date, and here we are tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight on this live interactive
Yeah.
show. We have a little bit of I guess track to lay down, but if we have time, we will be taking your questions at the later part of the show. But seeing as we missed the look-see for the month of March, I think maybe we should start there for the people who might not have seen your last videos, Penny, and then I'll ask you a few questions with respect to some of the current going-ons with respect to the war, the banking system, the current collapse, the food supply chain issues we're seeing, and where perhaps all of that is leading us here in the next couple of months. So we have a lot to cover. Penny, the microphone is yours. Let's maybe start with an outline of the last look-see for the audience.
See.
Yeah.
Okay. So I haven't reviewed it because it's been such a busy month and I was traveling. But there were 5 points in it. I started out looking, okay, what's going on here, and what unfolded was this entire picture that the cabal had a 5-step plan that they were going to try and implement by the time summer was over at the latest. And that 5-step plan, we were on step 3 already. The first step was the election and being able to, how would I say, being able to grab that election and make it go the way they wanted it to go. Okay, so that was the first thing that they had to do in this plan. The second thing was really the pandemic. Can I say that word? Is that one of the bad words?
Yeah, we could say the thing going on around the world right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It was to amp that up a little bit further and to really push the jab and to not back off from that. So that was the second part. The third piece was to get Putin to get in there and attack Ukraine, or to make a move on Ukraine. The way that it came to me was that they just kept taunting him and moving people and machines and missiles and cavalry, closer and closer to the Ukraine borders and the Russian borders. And Russia finally just stood up and said, that's enough of that. And so that started the whole war thing. And that was a critical piece, getting that to happen. So that then, the fourth step was the banking collapse. That was going to be scheduled for like May, June. And almost at the same time, there was this something with China. The fifth step was some kind of crisis with China. I thought it was an assassination of a major leader. I wasn't sure. And maybe something to do with Taiwan. Even though, like more than a month ago, I read an article in, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it, but it was a pretty serious article about Russia or China and Taiwan having agreed to come together peaceably. And so there was no reason to have a war. And yet what we hear is, oh, China's going to attack Taiwan over and over. And so they're trying to build that up, even though China and Taiwan have secret agreements in the background. So that was the 5 pieces. And I filled in a bunch of stuff, around that. But those were the 5 steps. And I had been watching for quite a while, thinking, no, Putin's not going to get suckered into that, to making a move in Ukraine. But I'm not sure. The one day I think Putin is part of the whole thing, and the next day I think, oh, I don't think he is. And then the next day I think, well, doesn't look good. And so what I see now is with Putin and with Trump, and maybe Xi, but I haven't watched Xi Jinping closely, is that they are dancing in such a way that they're trying to not, uh, they're trying to pretend like they're working with the cabal, but I'm not sure they really are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it's a very careful dance.
They're walking a tightrope, that's for sure, and they're keeping you
Yeah.
and myself and a lot of other analysts guessing with all of this because it is the fog of war, of course. Now, you mentioned this 5-point plan. We're well underway, of course. The number one has gone and passed. Number two is still ongoing on, and here in Canada, they're still pushing it. The federal government wants to announce new measures tomorrow for the unwilling federal workforce. They're going to add, I guess, the boosters to the list. So if you're not boosted now, you're also going to be penalized and lose your work. At least that is the trial balloon that is being floated right now in the last 2 days. So you can tell they're still pushing on that, even though most of our provinces have lifted the mandates. Our federal government has not. Monsieur Trudeau is staunch in his resolve to keep pushing this narrative for some reason. And of course, it seems to line up here with this 5 plan you're talking about. Now, what's interesting, you mentioned the point number 4, the banking collapse. Now, that is also in line with what Cliff High is seeing. So if you guys haven't followed this, you can find him on his Substack. He was just deleted off of Twitter, by the way, a couple of days ago. That might change now that Elon Musk is has 9.2% controlling interest there. So we'll see, and including maybe Twitter's, Trump's Twitter channel also. So we'll be watching that in the next couple of days. But if you want to follow Cliff here, you can follow him on his Substack. And in this particular writing tomorrow, this was Sunday night, he was talking about how everything that's happening now in Ukraine is going to be forcing a very critical banking issues, some inflation already here in Europe now this week, and perhaps within 2 to 3 weeks here in North America. And in one of his latest videos, he also talked about some of the WebAuth data suggesting that starting around May 17th, to May 27th, he called it the 7 days of May, that we could see this banking collapse here in North America as well. So let's dive into that a little bit. What are your understandings right now, and what are the tie-ins with Ukraine and Russia and perhaps Deutsche Bank on how all of this is interconnecting and spelling out maybe this banking collapse? What say you?
Yeah, I have been watching for months now. Okay, looks like we're going to have a collapse, but there was never, I could never identify what's the linchpin. You pull that pin and the whole thing goes kaboom.
Mm-hmm.
And so kept watching for that. And then just a day or two ago, I was reading something. I think, I don't know the name of the blog, but David Dubine was on. And he was talking about food shortages, I think. I think it was him. Anyway, the thing, the linchpin showed up. And it was like, oh my God, there it is. And here's the setup. The Deutsche Bank had a whole bunch of 1,500 IT specialists in Ukraine and Russia, run by Russians, and they were making the entire banking system, Deutsche Bank's banking system, and commodity exchanges and all that kind of stuff operate. And this was an IT team that had to upgrade and redo and redo again their servers over and over on almost a daily basis. And then the war in Ukraine started. And when that happened and the Russians were made bad boys, that whole operation was shut down, and Deutsche Bank no longer had anybody that could facilitate or make those transactions happen for all those commodities. And so when I was reading that, it was like, oh, there is the linchpin. Nothing is working. Nothing is happening between a lot of people. That's us. We are the ones getting the short end of the stick there. commodities are going to start not showing up everywhere. And so I think that I hadn't read the thing that Cliff wrote, but I love his Substack thing. I only read 3 or 4 of them, but each one of them has been excellent.
Well, what's interesting to what you're saying there too, here in Canada, up until just a couple of days ago, it was kind of like conspiracy theory that we would have shortages and the banks and the governments kept telling no, everything's okay, everything's fine. Yet just 2-3 days ago here, our prime minister said, get ready for food shortages. It's already on the way. It's already baked in the cake, or words to that effect. And it was funny because on that day I was watching very closely and the Costco's weren't filled up. Like people are like, like they're so disillusioned right now. They've been lied to so many times in the last 2 years that now here we have our politicians telling you, dude, you're going to run out of food here because we're organizing it in some fashion here. It's part of that 5-step plan. People aren't really paying attention. So I'm happy that you're bringing this up because for a lot of people, they seem to think that everything is going to be okay and that, there's going to be a white knight savior at the end of the week and all of this stuff. And I keep trying on the show to say, yeah, we can hope for the best. You can definitely prepare yourself. You can definitely be more self-sustaining yourself. You can have your own gardens and your greenhouse and all that stuff. But to think that everything will be done for you in the context of what you're just talking about now, this 5-point plan of the bad people here to continue and perpetuate and to further enslave humanity, they're not stopping. So it's not because the narrative on one end of their 5-point plan is broken that they're stopping. They're still looking at every opportunity to push that forward. Now, let me ask you, Penny, though, in that 5-point plan, what are you gleaning is the ultimate objective? If you were to boil that down into a paragraph, what is it exactly, this 5-point plan? If they succeed, and again, we're not saying they are, we're just telling you what these fuckers are trying to do. If they succeed, what is that ultimate goal for them? And so knowing that, we can kind of retro-engineer ourselves and pre-position ourselves to not fall into that trap. So what do you think that is, Penny?
I think the biggest thing is to get rid of people, to reduce the population. Some of the reason for that is because they don't want to have to pay out the pensions. They don't want to have to pay out on the insurance companies. The insurance companies have put in a clause that says if you died because of
experimental
right?
the
experimental jab, you cannot claim any insurance money because it was an experiment. And so they have set it up so that we lose in every way. When I heard the latest numbers, I don't know if you guys have heard the interview between Rainer Fulmish and Todd Callender. He's an attorney. These are 2 attorneys talking. OMG. If you don't watch anything else this week, go and watch that. It is, if you want to understand the deep details, what I've witnessed over the last 2 years, a lot of people talking about the can we say the word, the V word, virus? Can we say
sure. Yeah.
Okay. Talking about that and this is happening and that's happening, all these pieces. And, as a naturopath and somebody who likes to put puzzle pieces together, I had a few pieces figured out and, etc. But when I heard that interview between Rainer and Todd, these 2 attorneys, it just laid out the entire thing in absolutely fabulously clear and simple terms. And it's really a mind blower. And so I think the biggest goal is to reduce the population. And they have, at this point, they think they have complete control over the people who get the jab and don't die because they've changed the DNA. And there's a law on the books in the Supreme Court. And I think they just renewed this law or revised it a year or so ago. And that law says if you alter the DNA of something, then you own it. And so they're interpreting that to be, you probably heard this, they're interpreting that to be that those people will be owned by those pharmaceutical companies. And I think that that's a horse pucky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it. That is it. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that whole thing of we have to begin to say to the powers that be, look, if you want to change the DNA of some amoeba, you go right ahead, but that doesn't apply to human beings, to humans.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are sovereign beings. Well, they're trying to set it up so that we get rid of as many people as we can, and those who remain are not sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big thing. And then, of course, the whole financial control, the ideas that they have are really kind of sick. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I try not to look at that because it just makes me so upset.
Right.
But they are very sick, and they don't, and it doesn't make sense. So I have a new thing that I say, that we need a new meme. And the meme is for Klaus Schwab. It's like, Schwabi, we're going to Schwab the decks with you. I don't think you're going to get away with any damn thing.
Right.
So, it's really, at this point, they're succeeding to an extent. And I think what I see now is they're making moves that they hope will take out the big leaders,
Mm-hmm.
the Trumps, the Putins, and the Xi's kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
leaving leaderless nations, and then they'll step in. So
Right. Okay. It appears that of course, again, it appears that that's the direction they want to take. And all this is leading us into this social credit, new financial system. I was watching earlier today, ex-Bank of Canada Governor Pelosi in an interview where he was asked about how to hedge inflation. And he was scrambling to say, oh, well, central bank policy is the best way to hedge inflation. I'm like, no, that's not working, you dumb fuck. And of course, the interviewer was asking about Bitcoin, and Pelosi like, oh, that's bad. But central bank issues digital currencies, those are coming, and those are good because those are like, they're safe and they're mandated by the government, right? So you can tell they're scrambling there because a lot of people are realizing, oh my God, I bought Bitcoin at $300. It's worth 50,000 today. I'm hedging inflation quite well, thank you very much, compared to the people who are still holding their banknotes and losing crazy amounts of purchasing power every day. So even for him to say that on TV today was just ridiculous on its.
Let me just add something from the look-see about that. That was one of the things that became clear in the look-see, was that they were going to collapse the banks, and that was going to happen. Everybody, well, you guys don't have Memorial Day weekend. I don't think you do. But in the U.S., by Memorial Day weekend, everybody in the U.S. was freaking out over the financial thing. And so something happened, and you just said some dates that Cliffy had mentioned were going to be difficult.
May 17 to May 27. And there's also this big alignment and this eclipse on May 19. So we'll be in that window of that eclipse. And if I can bring that chart up, I'll show that to you guys too. That was in our last Crypto Woo report. It's also disastrous for the natal charts of the United States, the banking system, the cabal, all of these guys. So I'm going to see if I can bring that up. But keep going with respect to these dates in May, because what Cliff was saying is that the emotional values for these days are basically top line volume. There's no way for it to go any higher. And we're in that constant period for a good 7 to 10 days there in May.
Okay, so that once that collapses, once the dollar is, the banks collapse, they don't all collapse at once. They're staging it so that it looks really natural, or they're trying to. But then they come out with, well, if you had money in the bank and you lost that money, we will replace it with central bank digital currencies. And all you have to do is sign here on the dotted line, and all your money will be returned to your account in the form of digital bank, central bank digital currencies. And that's when they get you.
Right.
They have control at that point. And there was, in the look-see, there was a warning that said, move your money now. Just take the time to do something
Right.
that gets it out of their hands. And it also looked like the top tier banks were the ones that had the great difficulty, the ones that were too big to fail. But the lower banks, the regional banks and the credit unions, a lot of those were okay. A lot of them. They didn't
Mhm.
all collapse. So I thought, okay, this is a little bit hopeful here. Um,
Mhm.
so when you said that there's some high emotions at the end of May, that matches what I saw back in January, I think it was, where I saw the system as a dinosaur went down on one knee in February and on two knees in March or something like that, and it was on its belly in April, and May it keeled over and died.
Mm.
So
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Let me bring up, just as reference material for the audience members, this is the last Cliff High video, Secrets Reveal, and he's talking about one of these big data sets that kept accruing over the years, and he's showing on the screen here some of the temple markers that just now are manifesting, but what he was suggesting is that in the last 2 years, we've had so many of those temporal markers also manifest. So these are all parts of this big Secrets Reveal, and in there, we get this crack up boon, and then eventually here this banking collapse if we bring it forward a little bit. So you guys go check that out on BitChute. But in terms of the astrology, is May 16 was the date. This is the full moon lunar eclipse. The first eclipse in Scorpio since the 2014 in the financial axis. What we're talking about here is Scorpio, the old banking system, power systems that enslaved the masses, the big fall of the C word, central banking, the Federal Reserve. So, and there might also be, and I thought I'd ask you about this, the lunar eclipse traditionally in astrology points to maybe the eclipsing of a public woman. And I was wondering if that might be Clinton. Right now, of course, we're hearing about the Hunter Biden laptop story. We know that Trump is suing the Clinton Foundation now also for the fake narrative on the Russia collusion. Was there anything in your look-see? We'll get back to the financial stuff here in a second in these dates, but was there anything in your look-see about a woman being eclipsed, something making the news, maybe the Queen maybe finally disappearing from public view officially? Anything in the
That was
look-see?
my first thought, was
Yeah.
that it was the Queen.
Mhm.
Um, there's funny moves that I see happening around the Queen, and I just have this feeling that she's getting ready to go, or something along those lines. Now, it could be Clinton, it could be somebody else, but that's one of those things that didn't come up in the look-see. But I've seen that issue around the Queen like 5 times, and then she pops up again, and I think, whoa,
Hmm.
it's one of those, Jack in the Box leaders. Just
Well, that
keeps.
means a lot also for our Commonwealth. Again, if we go back to some of the Webbot data, Cliff was talking about a dissolution of Canada or reconstituted Canada, maybe having something to do, I guess, with the Commonwealth and the Queen being dead and the whole restructuring of that premise.
Oh,
That's interesting. But if let's go back to the financial stuff here. The destruction of the old financial system officially starts around this eclipse and will go on until mid 2023. Some people have it out to 2025 by the time we get a certain stability back. And going back to Jim Sinclair here at JS Mindset and Cliff's data as well, they were talking about 3 specific resets being offered and all of them being refused by humanity until finally we all came together for a new organic
right.
economy void of this financial system that basically siphons off all of our energy in this energy extraction matrix. So how do you see that playing out here, this destruction of the banking system, perhaps in that is starting now, actually in April, if you look at some of the headlines, but maybe in earnest in May of this year? How do you run that through the next 6 months, and what can the audience members do to maybe get their money out of harm's way? What would you say?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I subscribe to a bunch of financial letters, and I read those pretty regularly. And the consensus among the guys who work in that field, these are big names in finance, international global finance. And their assessment is that the crash started about a year ago. There is not going to be one sudden solid crash. They call it a rolling crash, kind of like a rolling blackout. And they had figures over this last month that were stunning. This sector is down 20%. This one's down 35. This one's down 42. This one's down 28. The sectors were down a lot, and they're not recovering at all. No sign of recovery, and they expect this rolling crash to finish taking out pretty much everybody and everything who still has their money in the big banks and in some of the stock markets. It's too late to, you're just going to have to eat your losses. But the overall thing is buy some silver, buy some gold, buy some land. We're at that point where there are no more alternatives. Buy some Bitcoin. They did recommend, several of them recommended Bitcoin, and that's it. That's it. There are no more alternatives. And we're
I know.
out of
People seem to think it's complicated. It's really not complicated at this point, but it's getting even more complicated. If you read that last Substack from Cliff, let me just bring it down to the bottom of the page. He said, yeah, Bitcoin, if you can get some, gold is good, of course, and Russians are buying it and accepting it now, of course, but it could be too late for silver. And we're talking about that with Bix Weir also, and Andy Sheckman, who's on the show. They're having a lot of difficulty sourcing silver. Here in Canada, most of the dealers, if you look at their website, they're out of the Royal Canadian Mint products, and it says a return maybe 6 to 8 weeks from now, and the emphasis on maybe. So you're ordering now, and perhaps your order will be filled in 2 months. In 2 months, this will all be over. We'll understand the banking collapse will be in rearview mirror, and we will be breaking down exactly how it happened, as opposed to talking about it happening like we are today. So if you're looking for silver, guys, well, first of all, let me just bring this one up. Of course, Miles Franklin's still has silver for you guys. I know that Trump silver coins are out of stock already, guys. Sorry about that. They went really fast, as discussed. I believe they still have these 2022 silver Britannias. They're $5.50 over spot right now. And if you're on the Canadian side of the border, we do still have these 10-ounce silver bars at $5.95 over spot Canadian, and that is at mfbullion.ca. Now, going back to this Bitcoin thing, I wanted to ask you, for a lot of people in the truther community, we've heard rumors that Bitcoin was created by the cabal, and it's going to be a big pump and dump, and they're going to use that to enslave us. There is that narrative out there, but I usually have the same reaction as you. Like, I don't know. They've done everything they can to kill Bitcoin. They don't like Bitcoin. They want their central bank issued cryptocurrencies, but they don't like the sovereignty and the how do you call it?
Who's in control?
The freedom that comes, with Bitcoin and decentralized finance. They don't like that. That's what they don't want. So keep going.
Right. I think Bitcoin is absolutely the killer as far as they're concerned. They don't like it because they can't control it. And they, even though they may have gotten their toes into the crypto market, it's not going to go, I don't think it's going to go in their favor.
Right.
So, yeah, Bitcoin is not a bad deal.
And again, you could have bought Bitcoin just a couple of years ago at $300, then $888, which was in Cliff High's data. And he said, once we see that go through $888 3 times, you'll never see these numbers again. And here we are sitting at, how much are we at tonight? 48,000, 45,000 on Bitcoin. And now we still have the market analysts. I was pointing to Armstrong Economics earlier. These guys are looking at 150 to 250, anywhere between that. If you look at Max Kaiser, also predictions for the end of the year in Bitcoin. And it makes sense when you look at all the money printed being printed right now. And I used to have this chart that I used when I was teaching about cryptocurrencies at my dojo. If I can find it while we're talking, I'll bring it up just to show you graphically that only in 2009, you can go a long way with $20 worth of Bitcoin. Whereas today you're needing that barrel of money to buy only that one Bitcoin. So of course, when Pelosi was saying on Twitter earlier that, you couldn't hedge inflation with decentralized cryptocurrencies, he's flat out lying. The proof is in the pudding. Of course you can. And if you were given that choice 5 years ago and people had told you, hey, do you want to buy Bitcoin at 5,000? It's sitting at 50 today. Or do you want to leave that 5,000 in the bank? Looking back on it now, you'd say, oh, I think I'd rather not keep the paper because it seems to be not worth much these days. That's for sure. Let's talk about this food crisis. Now, we didn't talk about it necessarily in the 5-point plan, but as you were describing here in terms of them, the bad guys, call them what you want, being able to implement the solution that they want to continue to enslave the population, in their mind, they have to make it so bad, so horrible for a long period of time so that humans would say, okay, enough. I can't stand this anymore. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to inject. Where do I sign on the dotted line? Please end my misery. Let's talk about this food shortages. We are going into this solar minimum. That's one thing that the media is not telling us the truth about. And two, we're seeing now this orchestrated dislocation in our supply chain management. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine, but even here in Canada with the vaccine mandate for our truckers, that's now also further exacerbated the supply chain management stuff. So where do you see the real issues? Is it ubiquitous across the board? Or we're going to see pockets in the United States? How do you, and perhaps the old books from the Robes back in the 80s, outline these food shortages here that are just around the corner?
Let me say something about food shortages, but let me also make a comment about the Robes. The country of Canada is the second country to break up for reasons that had to do with starvation. So the USSR was the first big, regional country or nation to break up. That was way back in 85, maybe 25 and 90. And then nothing happened until Canada braked up. So, and I remember thinking, no, not Canada. That Canada there is quiet as mice. But I think now that I look back on what I saw, because you're colder, you have a short growing season, and you have to have food shipped in, and it doesn't happen. And it looks like it splits right in two. And so that's coming. In terms of food shortages, the Ukraine and Russia.
Hold on. Don't go too far. Sorry, I had muted myself. There was an echo. Don't go too far. A lot of people are going to say, hey, wait, what? That sounds a lot like something else. I'll cue you in on this if you don't know. But first of all, in the Robes, did they give a time frame for this Canada reconstitution or splitting up? Do you have an idea, or is that in relation to other events? And where do you peg that in the timeline?
It's right about now. It was mid 2020s. So we're at 2022, and so we're almost to the mid 20s. And Canada was the second country, and then it was followed almost immediately by the U.S., India. There were several other countries. I can't remember. It's been too long. But that breakup was like, holy cow. The whole world was coming apart all at the same time. So...
Okay, hold on a second here. Not necessarily in this video. I'm not sure Cliff actually mentioned this in this last video, but again, go watch it. It's Secrets Revealed, and you can find them on bitchute.com/Cliff_high. Just take a snapshot there and you can find that address. But he did mention this to me 2-3 months ago, forecasting what was about to happen in Canada. And he had sent Joe, Bix, and myself an email saying, good luck to JC, is going to need it. I'm like, what the fuck am I going to need luck for in Canada? Nothing ever happens here. And of course, then we had this huge freedom rally, this huge emergency act, power grab by the government. And somewhere in March in his data set, we're past March now, but it doesn't mean the event hasn't already occurred to eventually bring us to the reconstituted Canada he was seeing. So that was some of the WebBot data as of late that he was seeing. But he reminded me when I asked him about it, that this was a 20-year-old WebBot data set where Canada would split up. And he talked about Ottawa as this weird not no-fly zone or decent or demilitarized zone. That would be basically a split between both sides of the country, and that we would come to Ottawa to meet East versus West, and that it would be a weird situation of air traffic control because of that. And this has been accruing for 20 years in his webbot data, and he never saw really how it could happen until some of these last temporal markers started to hit. And also, if you recall, maybe in September, October, he was looking at the global V situation, and people were asking him, "Okay, where's this going to end? Is it finally going to end in the United States?" And he said, "Well, not necessarily." And people were asking Australia and all that. And he says, "No, not necessarily." But he said, "We saw North America, something would happen, and then it would expand out toward the world. This huge consciousness about the V thing and how we can basically get out from under it and break this narrative." And of course, then the Freedom Convoy happened right on cue. So again, expanding all around the world, where a lot of other countries have used that same model. And here we are now today in this weird stalemate situation, but it doesn't mean that the thing is over. That's the thing. People seem to forget that just a couple of weeks ago, there was 2.2 million people on Parliament Hill here in Ottawa in minus 30 temperatures. What's going to happen come springtime when it's hot again, and when they try to continue pushing this narrative? This ain't over by a long shot. So, Penny, how does that fit into your look-see and perhaps your own intuition here?
Well, let's go back to the thing about Canada breaking up. That breakup, the way that I saw it, if this was the mitten of Michigan, it was like almost straight up from the top of the mitten, and the country split. So Ontario and Quebec were together on one side, and then the rest were the other. And there was there were a lot of food problems. Now, California is going through a drought. That means that Michigan, there's a 35-mile wide strip along the West Michigan, Lake Michigan, along West Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That's called the fruit belt. And that weather, the weather here, is just right for growing these fabulous fruits with a tremendously powerful bouquet.
Mm-hmm.
Farmer terms there for the bricks. The bricks is sugar, and then the flavor. And nobody can hold a candle to a Michigan peach. Not California, and not Florida, and not Georgia. And we get premiums for our fruit. So we became this new San Fernando Valley kind of place where people were turning to get food, and people were sneaking food over to Canada because they didn't have any. So that was a problem. Then in terms of food security, that just went down. I mean, I've already seen it now going down. Russia and Ukraine provided the U.S. with 30% of the grain of the wheat of the world, and I think soy. That's 30%. That stuff is not going to be available for some kind of processing and making into some kind of goodie or something to put in your tummy. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not going to be there. That's one thing. I think Brazil uh, and India and maybe Africa are all saying that our or their production is down like 40-50%. and, and that's just, I mean, what we're talking about here is that the half of the food supply is going to disappear, and that is really distressing. That what we'll see first is food prices go up, and they're expected to go up. Already they're saying, no, we're not shipping to you guys because you're bad, or you're this, or you're not paying in the right denomination. And so I think by the time we get to June, we're going to see prices have gone up tremendously. I think by the time we get to September, we're going to see a little bit of panic in all of the countries. And some of the countries that don't grow anything are going to be between a rock and a hard place.
Hmm.
So let me encourage everybody who knows how to plant a seed and is willing to get out there and weed it once a week or every 2 weeks, you better do it, or you're probably going to be hungry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We started this greenhouse project with the kids a couple of years ago, and we're learning every year. We're learning new tricks on how to produce even more. And what I was saying, because I had a neighbor come by the other day, like, "Oh, how do you do that, JC? We want to do that too in our house and all that." And I said, "Well, I did all of these mistakes, and look how it's growing. I mean, it's still growing like crazy."
I know.
So clearly, it's not that hard. You just have to put the time, and of course, you'll make mistakes at first, but still, universe will reward you there. Going back to the map, you said Michigan. Yeah, I'm not sure if Cliff had included Toronto and Ottawa in this weird no-fly zone area. You're close to what he was talking about here on the map. You've written that in. You were like Michigan, Detroit here, Toronto, Ottawa's right there. So it could be that this is the area that could become this weird no-fly zone or demilitarized zone, or I'm not sure how he called it, but that would separate East and West, and we would have meetings here between the two different sides of the country, so to speak. So I'm not sure if Toronto was in that. It makes sense, but you're right about this growing area. Or for Canada, also south of Toronto here in the Niagara region, great wines, fruit also here, very similar to what we can find out west. So very interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, interesting times to say the least. You talked about Bitcoin earlier. Let me bring something up. Somebody says, BC Crypto Mike, B Crypto Mike, Cliff said XRP would disappear with the banks. They're saying, he was saying in this last video, Cliff was, that XRP's biggest client or only client are the banks. And when the banks fall, there's no really need for XRP, which wanted to tout themselves as maybe the replacement to the SWIFT system, because we won't need the middleman with decentralized cryptocurrencies, right? What's your take on either XRP here in this particular case, if you want to jump into that, or this whole war that we are going to fight in the cryptocurrency space, which is between the war between the decentralized coin and the avenue now, the advent now of the centralized or the central bank issued digital currencies. How do you see that playing out, Penny?
I think that you hit it right on the head. There's only a few coins that I have picked up a little piece of something with. One of them is XRP. It's going to come to a fork in the road, and I don't mean a digital fork.
Right.
It's a fork in the road in which it has to decide, does the bank take the money and run, or do they try to sell it to somebody else and merge it with somebody else, and you'll get some of your money? That has not been decided yet. So that's one. The other one that I've picked up sales with, I think, is Cardano. Is that how you say it?
ADA Cardano, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it merges with somebody. And so if you hold that, maybe at some point that's going to become something else. But the rest of them, I've been so busy. I've just kind of like, okay, yeah, those are still alive, still going. They all do pretty well. When we get to the fall of this year, it looks like there's scrambling, trying to make sure that the crypto, whoever's offering crypto, let's say you had a crypto, you would be scrambling, or you were selling crypto, you'd be scrambling to make sure that that was going to survive. So there's some kind of survival scramble toward the end of this year. And then after that, it looks like it just keeps on creeping up. So we do have some issues. There are some issues with energy around cryptos. So a couple of places I keep seeing that
for the mining rigs, you mean?
No, that there's some kind of deliberate attempt to turn off the electricity in a couple places where there are big banks of servers, not financial banks,
right.
Server banks, and in an attempt to say, oh, well, you can't use that, can't trade. But the price of fuel becomes so expensive as we get into the winter of this year that some people turn their stuff off, their servers off for a certain period of time, and that limits what kind of trading they can do. It just becomes nuts for a little bit.
Wow.
We may end up. I've tried to see. Okay, is Trump coming back? Is there anything that looks normal? Are we going back to anything that looks normal? Every time I look for that and try to set that up, and I put him in place, and I watch him for a minute. Within a minute, he turns around and walks away. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. I have something else to do. I'm not sure what that is, but
Yeah, we're all
like,
trying to. Yeah, you're right. We're all trying to figure that out. There's a role there, I think, and a lot of other insight people and removing. There's a role, but not in the way that a lot of people have been expressing or hoping in the last 2 years would happen. Going back to XRP,
okay.
that we'll go back to maybe the political system here too, because with the fall of the banking system, we're also seeing the fall of these governance systems as well. And you've been talking about that. It's been in your books for a long time, and we need to basically take charge of ourselves and our own evolution here, moving into the age of Aquarius. We'll get back into that in a second. But XRP, a lot of people were disappointed to hear Cliff say that. But in another video, he had also said that there's probably a play here. And as Penny was saying, this is not all decided yet how this is going to play out. And of course, if it is tied to the banking system, as you saw Governor Pelosi earlier this morning, of course, they're still pitching and they're going to try to legislate the decentralized coins out of the way so that they can promote only their banker coins. So in that way, there's still a play to be made with perhaps the XRPs of the world. This is not financial advice, but at least it's a conversation to be had. All is not lost here with XRP, and depending who takes it over also, because like some other coins, it appears that originally they might have been used for the old banking system and control systems, and now they might be captured, perhaps like CNN is, perhaps like Twitter is going to be, and then brought back towards the benefit of humanity. So again, folks, caution, caution, caution in cryptocurrency. Steady, steady, and steady. Somebody was just saying, oh my God, I need to take JC and Jason Ford's crypto class. If you haven't done so already, let me bring that up on the screen. Also, you're looking for this one here. Joe and I put this together. This is going to help you, if you haven't done so already, basically in a 2.5 hour, 3 hour course here, get you started, set up your exchange safely, set up your first wallet safely, also your first transaction, and moving your money from the exchange to your wallet. So everything you need to really get started is in this course. If you have done so, please check it out. You can find it at beyondmystic.net /pay-per-view, and then you'll see those. And if you're already into crypto and you're looking at getting a hedge maybe on which coins, and there's quite a few in April that are actually going to go ballistic here. So if you haven't seen this episode, go check it out. That's the Beyond Crypto Woo. If you want to tie that into the astrology also for yourself, in terms of your sun sign and your rising sign and how cryptocurrencies, your business, your finances are going to be affected, please check out this episode. It's a unique contrast here of astrology with tarot, also available now on the pay-per-view. Now, Janine, let's go. Janine, as I was talking about Janine. Penny, as we're talking about the return of Mr. T, let's put that question around. Are we going to see the departure of Mr. B? Because right now, if you look at the mainstream media in the last 2 weeks, they seem to be throwing him under the bus, and they seem to also be using the son, Hunter here, and the famous laptop, which a bunch of us YouTubers got deleted or strikes 2 years ago for, nonsense conspiracy theories that turn out to be true. There are linkages there, and there are already people in jail for some of the activity in that laptop. So are we going to see maybe the departure of Mr. B as we know him now? What are you seeing in your last look-see?
I keep looking for that. I keep wanting to see that. Every time I go to look, it's like he's already gone. And then I think, okay, so let's assume that somebody's playing that role. And let's assume that they are carrying out this big, ridiculous play, this 5-act play or 10-act play or whatever. Is that going to come to an end? That does appear to come to an end. And it sort of it doesn't all crash at once. I'm not sure what a good descriptor would be. Like it shreds, or like a rope unweaves itself. It starts unweaving, or starts unraveling, and just gets more and more dramatic as we get to the end of the year. It looks like every time, let's go back to Trump for a minute. Every time I've tried to see, okay, is he coming back? The answer is no. And then I'm like, okay, what is he doing? What is the point of this? And the point seems to be to have played along with the naughty boys long enough to get them by the short hairs, and pull the rug out from under them. And that the devolution thing is really happening, and we aren't going to come back together as one nation. And part of the reason has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the people have had enough of national governments.
Right.
And so it becomes very chaotic. People who say, I'm not doing that, I'm not having that, I'm not putting up with that, I'm not honoring those rules, I'm not going to support that. There's quite a few people, quite a bit, that get behind that, and the whole thing goes from, okay, the bad boys made a mess, and now we're making a mess and finishing it off. And
Right.
so it's like, okay, and then when I get into 2023, 24, and 25, the efforts to take down the remains of whatever national governments there are left, that becomes an all-out effort. And there's chaos because we don't have anything set up behind it. So it's like, oh my gosh.
That might be where he is or will still be playing a role. I hear other analysts looking at this, that perhaps this is where the concentration is. It's not the return of the president as we see it, because I don't think the country is there as we see it. And Cliff was saying, maybe, just maybe, he doesn't know. All he knows is the emotional values here for May 17 to 27. And he was referring to this movie, 7 Days in May, I believe, from the 60s or 70s. And the plot twist was that a right-wing party was taking over a socialist, fraudulently elected government. Lo and behold, this is where we're at now. So it's kind of funny that he mentioned that.
Isn't that the movie we're watching right now?
Exactly. That's what he was saying. He says, what are the odds of that? And these 7 days of May correlate to the dates that are in his data. So he's saying it may not be that. Again, all he's saying is there's huge emotional spike values and tensions for these dates, but that could be interesting. And you just mentioned the devolution of things, and perhaps he was playing that role there. And perhaps when this comes to light, and somebody was saying on the screen earlier, she said, give him enough rope. Yes, Karen Bishop, give him enough rope. That's what apparently this devolution has done, because if you look at the Let's Go Brandon song, if you look at everybody chanting this stuff and the atrocious approval ratings of the pretendency right now, people just are fed up with it. And so between the narrative breaking down, between maybe even more pain here from the financial system crapping right in front of them, that might be the straw there for everybody to say, okay, this far no further, what do we do now? And then we talk about the divisions here in Canada, here in the States, and then maybe there in that devolution series is another act for Mr. T. Whether in the financial system, he seems to come up a lot in the reconstitutional dollar somehow. I'm not sure where, but that's the conversation. Go ahead.
I've had some other pictures that come up, and I just realized I'm blowing those off. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, that's exactly what I've been seeing, is that Trump plays a role in getting certain people elected into their state government or state mayorship or whatever it is. And then the piece that I always see is that he walks away, his work is done. Now the military, then backs up certain regional people that Trump has put in or recommended that we elect, and we end up with these regions where we take care of our region and we have a little bit of backing and et cetera. And I often end up thinking, well, that's not going to work, but that's really, that came up again as you were talking. It's like, I wonder if that's what his role is just to stabilize the regional development. When you do devolution, you don't just hand over the power to one or two guys. They then set up a variety of centers that become alternate Washington, D.C. style centers of control or management or government.
And look what's happening in Florida. This was just a couple of days ago, Penny. So we're tuning into this information. As of August 23rd, Florida primary draws near. Data released by the Office of the Governor, Ron DeSantis, shows that there are 100,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats in the Sunshine State. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I was asking some other remote viewers in Caesar, and they're saying this trend will continue here in the United States. And this also lines up with another, I don't know, 12 or 13-year-old Webbot data that suggested that the Democratic Party would no longer exist here at some point, and that it would completely implode on itself. And if you're watching the news, that's exactly what's happening.
I have seen that myself, and I agree with that. There will be no more Democrats. There really are. What I see is, and I'm just now starting to put it together, is that maybe Trump is just here to stabilize the institution of a half a dozen regions that take care of their people. So,
and that becomes like way showers, examples for other regions. Of course, we're seeing people flock to Florida in a big way from the United States. Here in Canada, too, we have a lot of people now, snowbirds, just trying to permanently move to Florida. That's absolutely fascinating. Wow. Yeah, well, here things are really weird. I mean, especially now if they introduce this new policy tomorrow. I think they're, when are we today? The 5th? Yeah, I think it's tomorrow for the federal workers, but that will also extend to travel. And right now, as a Canadian unwilling, we're not allowed to travel even between the states. We are by car, but not by train or by plane still. So we're still very much on lockdown. And what they're saying now is that maybe even a bigger portion of the population will be on lockdown if they include these boosters to this definition of the fully willing people. So I don't even like talking about that. It's here, it's in my backyard. But something tells me here, if we're getting to this event where we're looking at a reconstituted Canada, Cliff was talking about the new, what do they call it? The new Canuck or something like that? The new Canuck or the new loony or something like that. Anyways, yeah, something's coming up in the Webbot data that they would talk about Canadians in a different way, like they're new Canadians of sort, basically because we had a new reconstituted Canada. A lot has to happen between here and there, but this suggests perhaps why the Liberal government here, even though they won the last election, they had a minority government, they had to go so far as to make a deal with the NDP in a coalition government just a couple of weeks ago. And everybody's like, what the hell are they doing that for? I mean, the NDP was still voting for them and not,
What's the NDP?
A New Democratic Party, so another left-wing party. But now they've merged together where the NDP leader is now the deputy prime minister in a weird kind of shotgun marriage. And if you look at the narrative throughout the announcement of this, they kept saying for stability, stability, stability. And my gut feeling was, we're about to hit a huge crack of instability in this country, and they were trying to forewarn that and create this illusion of stability. Now, what there, I think, is going to create this instability? The repercussions from the war, the food, the hyperinflation, all of this, and maybe aliens still on top of that. This is why I put the little UFO above my head here today. Again, Cliff there is talking about maybe for June or July in this last video. I'm not sure here if he wrote it up on the screen, but for just past midsummer, or just past the summer mark. So he was pegging August. I think if I scroll this video to the end, we'll see the dates there. But he was talking about August, I believe, as the date where we would be
Okay.
introduced again here to this huge discussion around ETs, and that would eventually lead us to Antarctica, the truth in Antarctica, all of these things. How does
Oh
that
my.
tie into what you're seeing, Penny?
Well, yeah. Actually, he's saying that's going to happen this year, this July, August.
Yes.
I actually was seeing that last year, and I'm like, I didn't, after I said it, it was like, well, it didn't happen this year, so I'm way off there. But if that happens this year, I would not be surprised. I
Mhm.
started to talk more and more about some of the things I know. And, you can't tell somebody who's been on board those ships that they don't exist.
Right.
That just doesn't fly. And you can't tell somebody who's watched those things flying around that they don't exist. That's not going to, I mean, people are just going to end up writing you off as the people who don't believe are going to be written off. And so I do see that conversation is coming on more and more. We have to have a conversation that says, look, take away all of the stupid movie BS that's been programmed into us for years.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what do they want from us? What are they trying to get us to do or to say or to be or to understand or to know? And I have conversations back and forth with my people, not every day, but when I need it, they show up.
Mhm.
And that is something that I think we're going to have to look at. It's going to hit us in the face if
Right.
we don't.
And what he was saying here, I'm trying to
Ah,
recapitulate for you guys, folks. We talked
Antarctica.
about these temporal markers hitting. This Disney one just hit now. We saw some of those people being arrested. We saw this guy on the cruise ship just yesterday molesting somebody on camera in the elevator. This was all part of this timeline of temporal markers that would bring us to this KM. You guys know where this is from, the mafia, starting with the letter K, and their downfall. And this is what we're seeing now, perhaps happening in the Ukraine. But he said that this would lead us to our real history. Big chunks of our history that has been obfuscated from us would come out into the open in this big secrets
Uh,
reveal portion of this webbot data plot. And this would get us into Antarctica and, of course, the discussion about, he has it here, space aliens. And again, plugging this somewhere this summer, because, of course, he's talking about the death of the banking system here in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, perhaps even 3 weeks. So that ties into everything you're saying. Now, you and I have done this show on, oh, how did we call it? It was ETs and human trafficking, I think it was. And we talked about this harvesting plan from some of these ETs, and the fact that those who had that plan for Earth had left, and that structure had gone, but there were still these minions on the planet still acting as if that plan was still going forward. Can we take maybe the next couple of minutes here, explain what that was, and where we are in that timeline now in some of these minions realizing that this plan is no longer working, but that for some reason they still have to push it because it's do or die for them? How do we square that round?
well, backing up to not really the beginning, but just to a point where you can get your mind around it. My knowledge, I'll just say what I know. I know that there are some ET people who come on board a planet and they try to take over. And they usually will disrupt a small region of people, and that disruption causes the children being raised in that area to become somewhat dysfunctional. And
Mhm.
then from there, they start working with those dysfunctional people and they build this whole network of people that are either psychopathic or emotionally damaged or learning or emotionally disabled or sociopathic or have severe personality disorders or and the more that they disrupt other regions, the more choices they have to pick from. And the long-term goal is to build like this multiple honeycomb layer of businesses. They introduce the words corporate, they introduce religions, they introduce the concept of money, and that then begins to replace whatever the security, usually a planet's security is with its natural resources and the development of its people. So the goal for these ETs is to replace the planet as a source of natural resources and to replace that with money. And then to also just begin to build this this huge structure until everybody needs money to survive. And then they start introducing corporations as persons, their corporate rights. And then they start introducing what we call tort laws. Well, these corporations have rights. They have the right to this, that, and whatever. And then they get, 2, 3, 4 dozen layers of beings from that planet on board with their program, which is totally dysfunctional and designed to control everything. The secret agenda is to control everybody. Then there'll be a couple of moves, and the moves are typically going to be something to do with illness or some kind of war that takes out a whole bunch of them. And then what's left, do they say, oh, okay, it's our planet. Now, the people who are trying to take over this corner of the galaxy wanted to do so because this actually, our planet is part of a group of about 2 dozen others that are really in a very good position. They weren't so interested in us at first, but we're at the outer edge of one of these long arms. And that means that if you're able to travel intergalactically, interstellar, so first you have interplanetary travel. That's your first step off the planet. And then you have interstellar, which means you can go to other stars. And then you get so that you can go intergalactically. So you go from galaxy to galaxy. So we are on the outer edge of that galaxy, of our galaxy, Milky Way. And it's a nice little oasis, stopping off point for ships coming in and want to stop off and do whatever. Sometimes they refuel with water. Sometimes they have the capacity to produce everything they need, and they just want to stop and not have to be watching where they're going. We'll put it simply. And so then because of the amount of resistance that we have put up, and all those conspiracy theories were wonderful. So because they've convinced the beings that were here trying to take over that we weren't going to capitulate, that we were too wild and too crazy to try to do anything with. So last June, I got a message from my people that said, the bad boys in Antarctica have left. And I was like, ooh, is that true? And then in August, that got confirmed. And then again, it got confirmed again in October. And so what they said, you're left with all of those dysfunctional humans that were built as this honeycomb of control structures, and you're going to have to deal with that. So we are. And they're carrying on like they're going to make it work, and they don't have the brains, and they don't have the insight. They don't have the long-term vision. Then a lot of them do not really know or understand the physics behind the equipment that they're trying to use. And so they're having to make deals, and they're making bad deals, and some of those deals are going to blow up in their face. And that's where we're at today in terms of we're teetering, go either way. But I think we are absolutely going to make it, and in many, many ways. And I was just thinking about this earlier today. The cabal has done us a huge favor by getting us to wake up and do something with our consciousness. Right. And that is fabulous in the long run.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Well said. That brings us to today, because we're in that situation now, and we're seeing those minions. Basically, we're seeing the infighting now with all of them, and we're seeing enough momentum perhaps to crack in the open, and perhaps Ukraine is part of that now, because again, reporting here live in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, I saw how our mainstream media was basically saying the exact opposite of reality, all in unison together. And I always left doubt that perhaps I was wrong, that perhaps I was a conspiracy theorist, perhaps I was in the nut house, you know.
No,
But
no.
when I saw it from my own eyes in my own backyard, from that point forward, I could never deny that anymore. And when I see them using the same tactic against Russia right now, I have to wonder, are they
Yep.
doing the same thing, the exact opposite of what reality is happening? And I have to have that honest conversation with myself to say, wait a second here, I'm not going to get duped by all of this again. They seem to be doing the exact same modus operandi on us again with the mainstream news. And
That's
I think for a lot of Canadians, we woke up to that because of this Emergencies Act and this gift, basically, that Mr. Castro gave us with that move. So it's encouraging to see, as you're saying now too, that perhaps this awakening did contribute to the fact that this master plan now has no way of working. But that's not to say that there are not going to be a little bit of hard periods ahead of us to kind of redress all of this and take back control over things. And I think this is what we're seeing now. And humans are going to have some tough time moving forward. But like
right.
you, like Cliff High, who's so excited about sci-fi world,
I
he's
know.
like a kid in a candy store, knowing that this bug is being removed from our back. Yes, hard times ahead of us in order to do that and take control of our lives and be self-responsible. But after that, I mean, whoa, the sky's the limit in terms of human potential. That's what's exciting. And we're encouraging everybody watching the show to, yes, do what you need to do to get through this hump here, because it's not going to be easy, but the rewards on the other side and universe is really there to reward people who are going to create those solutions for humanity. So this is, again, not the strife controlling system that, extracts every ounce of energy from our system to, this off-world matrix. This energy is going to belong to us now. So imagine, with that same amount of input of energy, the output of what we humans can produce for ourselves, that we are going to keep for ourselves, is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Penny, what's in the robes that describes that future also for humanity, or anything else with contactees or contacts that you've had here over the last couple of months that would suggest that, yeah, we're on that trajectory?
We are. Actually, it's really quite exciting. I'm going out west at the end of April, and I'm going to look at some technology that I can't talk about right now, but it's pretty interesting. There are things. Let me just make a statement that kind of tags on to what you said. Don't be disheartened, you guys, if we have to go through a rough time, because what we're really doing is deconstructing that whole control mechanism, that whole setup that they put in place to control us. So be thinking about, how do you want to live?
Mhm.
What do you think would be a wonderful way to live? We're going to have to start talking about that. But having said that, there are technologies that are out there that we could have access to, but we can't. We can't even begin to apply it, or request or develop that, if we don't demonstrate that we are nonviolent. You have to be able to handle the worst of warlike attacks and have access to that kind of technology, and use your technology only for what is good. So
Mhm.
it's a paradoxical kind of thing. And when you have people that are military people, of course they get guns and new toys. They want to try them. They want to use them. That is one of the things that I have had conversations with my people saying, I don't see how we're ever going to get past that hurdle. We have to have this fabulous defensive technology, and we can't use that for anything evil in the day-to-day operations and in our relationships with other races of beings. So that's going to be a challenge. There are all sorts of things that I see coming that I'm like, oh my gosh, come on, come on, come on, come on. But you got to go slowly. A lot of people are still just beginning to wake up. And so you have to kind of handle them gently. You don't want people putting the brakes on and pounding on you because you said something that they just can't get their mind around. So all of that kind of sensitivity. But I think we're going to be surprised at how cooperative we are as human beings. I think we're going to probably be horrified for a little bit when we realize what was happening with all the children. There are some races of beings that prefer children for many, many reasons. And so that's where a lot of our children went. And that's like, no. So we have this incredible new opportunity, a door, a window, whatever you want to call it, that's opening. And we're going to be in it to the eyeballs over the next 3 years. And we have to keep developing consciousness because we have this perfect storm of things happening in terms of we're still not past the micronova issue, and that's still hanging over us.
Can I ask you also, on your YouTube channel, you were talking about Edgar Casey and some of the prophecies here a couple months ago. Can we have an update on that? A lot of people this week were asking about this coastal event in the United States, maybe changing the configuration of the country all in and of itself. What's the latest on that from your perspective? Are we going to see one of those weird water coastal events here in North America, and what's the outcome from that?
We'll know more in a year. So what we have are three things actually coming at us. One is the grand solar minimum, which occurs every 400 years, and in which the snow never melts from the Mason-Dixon line up. And so that's a problem. That means that a lot of most of us live in North America. So if you carry that line, which is maybe 40 degrees latitude around the globe, whoever's above that line is like, uh-oh. So there's the grand solar minimum, and that we've already started into that. And it happens every 400 years and lasts maybe 20, 30 years. And then we have the North and South Pole. The magnetic poles are moving toward one another when they do this on a cyclical basis, and they've been moving toward one another. I've been watching that for probably, I'm going to say 6-7 years now. Thinking that's not going to keep moving like that, is it? That couldn't. And it's moving. And now we're only, oh my God, is it 46 miles away from the trigger point where we have a pole flip. Now, a pole flip can cause the planet to bobble around just a little bit, which is what I saw with the robes way back when. It just bobbed around a little bit. It didn't go shooting off into space. But it caused a lot of coastal water events. And the grand solar minimum, because the planet gets cold, it shrinks. When the planet gets cold and shrinks, you have many, many more volcanoes because the pressure on the volcanoes is tremendous. And so what we had is volcanoes going off along the California coastline, and some really serious earthquakes in the middle of the country along the Mississippi River. And I think that's called the New Madrid Fault. Some people call it the Madrid Fault. Right. But there's that. And then we have the micronova, which may be a much bigger event. And that also lasts something that has after effects for 30 years. So we have this perfect storm. And the only real option that I see is that we evolve our consciousness and move up just a little. So we're not entirely physical beings, but we haven't lost our physicality.
Right.
Develop our consciousness so we are powerful and we can have an impact on our surroundings. That's it.
Yeah. And the more we're enlightened, the more we can find solutions to all of these problems, void of the fakery and fuckery on mainstream news that keep us from actually thinking of solutions
That's
for
right.
all of these problems, and who actually enslave us to
Yeah.
these problems. So that's a big difference. Somebody
Yeah.
was asking in the chat in terms of this pole flipping. We're not far now to that trigger point. I'm not sure how much longer we need to wait to hit that critical number. Although in some of the Hopi prophecies, I believe it was, it could happen either before or after we reach that tipping point. It doesn't always happen in the same way. Now, in some instances, people have said that perhaps the countries, perhaps here like Canada, if we do have that flipping, we would become a tropical zone, and countries maybe like Mexico would have snow in that scenario. Have you seen anything like that too, or thought of how maybe
Uh,
that flipping can happen on a real physical basis on the planet?
so when you have a pole flip, that doesn't mean that the planet rolls over. It just means that the North and South Pole come together, and of course they immediately repel or attract or whatever they do. They have some sort of interaction. If they keep moving in the direction they're moving at the rate they're moving, then next April they're going to touch. And when they do, that will cause them to relocate, and that relocation might not be exactly back up to the top of the planet in the bottom. It could be off a little bit. When I was with the robes, what I saw was that there was a shift, and it took place in stages, and the shift ended up being a total of 17 degrees. And that's a pretty significant shift.
Mm-hmm.
So Siberia was up a little closer to the top of the planet, and Greenland was tipped a little bit more toward the equator, and the U.S. was a little more toward the equator. They're thinking that if the two North and South poles come together, they could go back to the same place they were, in which case there'd just be a little bobbling around.
Okay.
Or they could have something a little bit more of a bump, and there would be some tsunamis on the coastlines.
Right.
So but here's the thing: we have ways of being informed. I have seen water in places that shouldn't be.
Right.
Islands east of the Mississippi, a lot of islands in North America.
Yeah, and there was that Navy map that came out a couple of years ago too, where
Oh
there
yeah,
was, yeah, and there's a lot of water
years.
exactly in that area of the
Yeah,
eastern seaboard there that doesn't look at all like what it looks like now,
yeah,
and perhaps all the way up to Ottawa here too could be underwater, depending on some of those models. These lakes here, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and the
yep.
Mississippi would become this huge waterway splitting
Yeah, they
off.
empty out and
Yeah.
create huge, huge, almost like a break between the east and west side of the North
Mhm.
America.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody's saying, yeah, Edgar Casey predicted Earth would tilt more. Yeah, and that's what you were saying too. If we tilted a little bit more, then some of the
Yeah,
states would be a little bit closer to the equator. Some of, well, the eastern seaboard and perhaps all the way Greenland, sorry, would tilt a little bit down a little bit. That's
yeah,
a possibility. Yeah. I thought also maybe some of the currents, the hot air currents around the world would change because of this also, which would disrupt a lot of the growing areas around the planet as well.
it
So,
does, and it also disrupts the ocean currents, and that's a huge thing. You cannot disrupt those without having major climate change.
mhm.
So we're now in a time where we need to be watching. I track Maverick Star Reloaded. That's the website over and over again. It's like, okay, Maverick Star has been working on this for years. He knows his stuff, and he's pretty good at. And they are now estimating that those two the poles are going to come together, and that there's going to be a new South Pole somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, and a new North Pole in Siberia. So
Maverick Star Reloaded, you said?
Maverick Star Reloaded is
So their website, I think, is poleshiftnews.com.
okay.
Let me see if I can bring this up because people are asking. Poleshiftnews.com. I
All
guess we
three
go.
time. Okay.
If
JC,
okay, so let
you
me
live
bring
in
this up. Is
20th.
that what you're talking about?
Uh, I think, yeah, that's one of his. That is one of his. Maybe he changed his name, but that's what he's talking about is Pole Shift News.
Okay.
And yeah,
Well,
he's built some equipment to track it. It's like, I was like, oh, we're closer than I thought we were.
interesting. Michael is saying 17 degrees further south. That means JC will be living on the 28th north parallel. Yes, palm tree time. Wouldn't that be funny to have palm trees in my backyard? I'm all
Yeah,
for it.
the road said that. I immediately said, well, where's Michigan going to end up? And they said, you'll be about at the same level that Arizona was. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I would like that.
I could do that.
That-
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
a lot of disruption. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that we just, that we've already shifted about somewhere between 4 and 7 degrees.
Hmm.
So if there's another shift, and the shift we had was benign. So
Hmm.
we could shift again, and the only thing that would really change is the weather. Now,
Right.
my thing has been, okay, let's have that shift, and then let's laugh at those people telling us it's our fault. So climate change is our fault. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, even that narrative is breaking so fast. It's
Yeah,
not even funny anymore. But they're
I
still pushing it, and
I know,
Canada too with these they call them
right?
green passes and all that stuff. That's in other countries as well. At any
Yeah,
rate, wow, what an incredible show, Penny. We're already at the hour and a half mark. Let me remind the audience here they can find your work here at Penny Kelly on YouTube and also here on Consciousness on Fire. Please remember to subscribe to Penny's newsletter. What's coming up in terms of courses? I know they always sell up really quickly. Is there anything you wanted to share with the audience here before we went?
I
Courses
think.
or maybe a new book also.
Yeah, I actually am working on my new book, my latest one that got published last week or the end of last month. It's this one, the Planet Earth series. This is taken from my, this series, a 10-part series I did. It's got a little bit of extra stuff in it that I just didn't put in the series on the web. But I'm working on another one called The Revival, and it's a 12-part book that focuses on how do we rethink government, how do we rethink agriculture, education, medicine, money, business and trade, relationships with others out there in the stars, everything. The 12 sectors that we need to redesign, and that we need to be thinking about that and talking about that before we get hit with the mess, the chaos that says, okay, now we need that. So, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah. I love that you're doing that work, Penny, because again, just having these conversations, sometimes people say, oh, that's fear porn. I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
know. Talking about some reality is important. People don't always like it, but it makes you think and it makes you perhaps engage in preparedness that you wouldn't have otherwise done. And that's always a good thing. And I think
yeah,
as humans here, if we can talk openly about maybe what's to come, some of the
yeah,
plans of the cabal, maybe we can address them as adults and create solutions for them. Because when we
yeah,
don't, and when we succumb to all of this censorship where we're not allowed to talk about these things and we're only allowed to talk about love and light, then we don't really get together to talk about the
no,
solutions to real world problems that, regardless of our beliefs, will happen anyways, right? Like if you just go back and look at history, shit happens. It really
that's right.
does. And we do better as humans when we come together and we can talk about it and create
Yeah,
problems. This is also what you're doing for your
yeah,
audience members at the Tea and Consciousness here on Penny Kelly. This is
yeah.
patreon.com, of course, /Penny Kelly. What's going on there also? Talk about the Tea and Consciousness and what is included in some of these amazing packages for the audience.
Okay. Well, the teen consciousness is just a meeting. It's like a question and answer session that I do every Monday. The first 3 Mondays of each month. The last the last week I take off. But people can get on and ask questions about all sorts of things. A lot of people ask about health. Other people ask about spiritual stuff. There's people that are waking up, struggling with Kundalini. There's other people dealing with family questions and issues and all kinds of stuff. So that's a tea and consciousness. And then Daphne and I do a whole bunch of conversations where she grills me on really good questions about what I've written in my books. Well, what about this? And I try to debunk a lot of the New Age stuff. And, as a farmer, you have to look at what's real and, what may happen. Somebody said to me just recently, you really have a good sense of humor. And I said, wait, you have to. If you're a farmer, you don't know what's going to survive and what's going to live, die, or get ruined in the next storm or whatever. You just have to live day by day, and you look at it in terms of reality, and you prepare, and so you know you end up with a good sense of humor. And I think we could use a little bit of humor on this planet at this time. So,
Absolutely. Joy D is right. She says, JC is right. Shit happens. Yeah, it does happen. And it's no use ignoring it. It's just an idea of coming
right.
together and talking about it, because that's when we get to these solutions. And Penny, I have to thank you because, you and I have these weird conversations. We don't always agree, but we come together to share thoughts. That's the whole idea. And the fact that we're able to move the needle in our belief structure and our
Right.
understanding as we see events unfold. Because again, this
Yeah.
whole planet is built on this huge manipulation and obfuscation of the facts. And it's really impossible to know what the truth is. And it's really not healthy to stay married to one point of view. As humans, our
Yep.
understanding of the transitory nature of our reality changes day by day. So too does um, the way we express ourselves in it. And so we need to be open to everybody else's points of view. And this makes us better humans, even if sometimes it is challenging and we want to grasp the certain realities that we think we love and we appreciate.
No.
The world doesn't always work like that. And the fact that we can have these conversations and move the needle of our understanding and not feel guilty about asking hard questions of, wait, is that guy really good for us or isn't he?
Yeah.
It's healthy for us to do that. And this is what I love, Penny, about these conversations. You're just
Yeah.
amazing. And I'm reading a lot of the comments tonight. A lot of people are saying, yeah, great show. Thank you, Penny Kelly. That was
Thank
amazing. Thank you so much. Hey, Penny,
you.
any last words of wisdom for the audience members before we go tonight? A note of positivity, a note maybe channeled from some of your ET friends as to what's to come. What do you want to share before we go?
I think probably the advice would be, if you know how to plant seeds, plant something. You're gonna need some food. Plant something,
Mhm.
and and stay open. Stay open. It's hard sometimes to, even I get into these conversations where I'm like, can we end this? It's like, oh my God. Yeah. Take a deep breath and listen. Take
Yeah.
another deep breath and listen, and take another deep breath before you respond. We need to listen to one another. Sometimes we just need to hear what they're saying, and they just need to be heard, and it doesn't go beyond that. Other times it's critical. It's
Yeah.
critical.
There you
So,
go. Well said. Thank you so much. And folks, for more of that amazing wisdom, go to patreon.com/Penny Kelly. You can find her books also, including Planet Earth, the latest edition here at consciousnessonfire.com. And for all the amazing free content, also, you can go and subscribe
yep.
here to Penny Kelly on YouTube. This was another edition of A Break in the Clouds with the wonderful Penny Kelly. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic. Please do remember to like, share, and subscribe here on our third backup channel. Stay tuned this Thursday. Bill Holter will be on the line. We'll be talking about everything silver and gold and all the shenanigans happening now in this wartime scenario. So you don't want to miss that. And next week, Jay Widener with the cold hard truth is coming along. So this is going to be another one of those adult conversations. That's going to be on April 14th at 3 p.m. I look forward to seeing all of you there. I love you guys. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.